Happy International Women's Day 2022. And this year it's all about something called breaking down the bias. So, what are the biases about women and their sexuality and sex that are still around today? In this episode of Trancing in the Sheets, I talked to Traci, Kanaan, and FrejaNjorden about the biases that remain and how women can overcome them. Trancing in the Sheets. It's time for things to change. What do you feel are the sexual biases that are still very much around today, that are still kind of haunting or tormenting women in today's society?
Well, when I worked as a comedian for 18 years, I was consistently paid less. Or if they came to a budget shortfall, they would always ask me to cut my pay for whatever reason. I do remember a couple of instances of that. Yeah, I remember being targeted by male comics that I'm not really funny because I have tits, and that I do too many chick jokes, and I got a lot of those things. But as a hypnotist,
because half the population doesn't need your chick jokes.
Right, yeah, because you could. But do we have to be clean on this?
No, it's okay. Me. No.
All right. So, because the understanding is there, you can only hear so many tit and vagina and pussy jokes, but if a white male in his 20s or 30s talks about his dick for 20 minutes, perfectly fine. Yeah. And then people would target, like we'd have all chick shows and they'd be like, oh, I don't want to hear all that. Oh, I don't want to hear a bunch of white guys or black guys talk about their dick and jerking off for 45 minutes. It works both ways. And that's what I think most people don't get. So,
and why do you think there is that, where it's okay for men to be making jokes about their dicks, but women can't make jokes about their vaginas? What do you think why is that okay in society still?
I have no idea, because the women really think those jokes are funny because they all have those things that I make fun of. I don't know what I don't know why it is, other than just guys aren't used to talking about that. Or it's pushing them in an uncomfortable zone because they've never had to think about that. Could be, how they're raised as well.
Could be.
My whole thought is I'm aware of the bias, but I'm going to do what I fucking do anyway. And if you don't like what I have to talk about, guess what? Don't come to my fucking show. It's really simple. So I don't lose sleep over it, but I am aware of the bias, but I just do my thing.
Do you think, Freja, that translates through to how women talk about their sexuality? Because men are much more likely to talk about sex and sexuality than women are, and it still seems as a very taboo subject, especially female sexuality. Do you think that kind of translates across as well? I know maybe it's a shame thing. I don't know. Nice girls don't, eh?
Well, okay, a couple of things there. One is they talk about sex, but they don't talk about their sexuality. So they're happy to mention their body parts. They're happy to superficially mention fucking or doing something or make a joke about it, but they're not going to actually go for real into their sexuality. I think that with why it's not okay for women to talk about their pussies and sex for a long period of time, or to do it in a joking context, is because as a culture, women are used to being quiet and standing by and being uncomfortable and sitting there as long as the men are being entertained. And we're not used to being entertained. For us, we're used to sitting by while they're entertained. And we're also not used to men being maybe uncomfortable, like a little peaks. It can be uncomfortable to hear jokes about pussies, or, oh my God, women actually have a point of view. Women aren't impressed by us. Women aren't impressed by our silly penises. So once we start actually having opinions and laughing, they get a little bit uncomfortable, and that's not okay, because they have a type of discomfort that they're used to, this jocular discomfort. But once the female humor comes in, they start to feel a little bit of shame because it's different, and they're not used to feeling that little bit of shame and like, oh shit. So it's got to be shut down. And I think that's why there's that difference in terms of why it's okay to have that masculine humor versus the humor with female body parts. And another part of that is women, well, I was going to say that, you know, you were saying, was there a discrepancy? I think a big thing, there's this huge misconception that men don't care about female pleasure. Women will say it like a mantra. Men don't give a shit about us. Men don't give a shit about our pleasure. They only care about themselves. And we're boxing ourselves into this idea that nobody wants to please us, and nothing could be further from the truth. Nothing could be further from the truth. Of course, there are selfish men. Of course, there are immature men. But I think they're in a minority. And when we repeat that mantra, we're actually not allowing in the guys that are more than happy and would do anything under the sun, men or women, doesn't matter, you know, if you want to be with a woman instead of with a man, but everybody wants to please us. Everybody wants our approval. Everybody wants our sexual approval. The only reason they're so adamant about shutting down this humor is because they're afraid of the disapproval. They don't want to hear it. It's like, let's just pretend that we're approved of, versus kind of have that humor out there, because humor is truth, right? There's always truth in humor. So they don't want to feel that way. So I think that's one of the huge misconceptions, is that men are selfish and don't want to pleasure.
Absolutely. Do you think, I mean, one of the things that kind of feeds those misconceptions or biases is that, like, women don't like sex, which we know isn't true. That women are less sexual than men, which we also know isn't true, and that nice girls don't. You know, if you're a morally decent woman, then, you know, you wouldn't even be thinking about these things. So there's a lot of shame attached to that as well. So when you get humor attached to that, I mean, actually, I think that allows people to start. You know, humor is a great icebreaker, isn't it? But sometimes I think we run into where we need to be serious about it as well. So obviously, time and a place, we need to be, you know, like all your stuff, Traci, Princess of Paradise and all of that kind of stuff, absolutely amazing stuff. But we also need to have some of the more serious conversations, because I don't know about you, but sometimes when I'm teaching, I end up with like usually a row of, it's usually the kind of middle-aged men or at the back, and it's like having Beavis and Butthead in my lectures, and they're giggling, and, you know, and they find it really uncomfortable, so they deal with it with humor. But we need to kind of allow some of these more serious conversations so that women can go, do you know what, I can be sexual and I can enjoy sex and I can ask for what I want, rather than thinking that somehow it's going to be given to us just kind of, and men will kind of just miraculously know what it is that we want and how we want it.
That's I think one of the biggest subjects, if I were to have a subject or a pet thing to latch onto, it would be the subject of female passivity. Because most of the problems that we're encountering these days, because I'm going to say it's not the same today as it was 50 years ago. I think the sexual landscape has really changed for women. And we're still having a lot of the same problems, even though we have a completely different environment and a completely different resource set. And everything is available to us. The problem is we haven't shifted out of passivity into agency. And passivity, I mean, and having agency doesn't mean being aggressive. If you don't want to be aggressive, and if your particular dynamic is that you have a more assertive and dominant masculine partner, you don't have to be dominant and aggressive. You can have agency and get everything you could possibly dream of and more handed to you and gifted to you, making him the happiest man on the face of the planet and giving you everything you want. But you have to have agency. You can't sit there and be passive and say, well, I don't know. I don't know why I'm not getting what I want. I don't know why I'm not feeling good. I don't know what I like. I don't know how to please me. Well, you have to know. And you have to put on your big girl panties and actually take charge of this if you want to feel good and you want to get everything you want out of your sexual life.
Well, this is it. I mean, another word for agency, of course, is responsibility, isn't it? The two words go very much hand in hand. And that's one of the things that I certainly see. It's about that there's this kind of strange notion that somehow we're not responsible for our own pleasure. And if we're not responsible for our own pleasure, then who is? You know, we can't then complain that somebody's not doing it right, can we? You know, if we've not kind of given any kind of pointers, at least, you know, there's all of that kind of stuff. Traci, what do you think about in terms of helping how do we help women take agency and feel more responsible for their pleasure so that they get what they need and what they want?
It is encouraging them to express what it is they want. With the clients that I deal with, because I deal with a lot of people in the nudist and the swinger population, that's really not an issue. The women know that they are the ones in charge. The women pretty much dictate the play, who they're going to play with, when they're going to play, how they're going to play. And the guy is pretty much the one that has to run to keep up with the woman. Even though the guy may have been the one to instigate the lifestyle for his own needs, and because he wanted to see what he's missing, or he wanted the opportunities in the swinging lifestyle, men often find that they're kind of left in the dust because the women are the desirable ones. And so it's always interesting to see the conflicts there when the woman who has been passive and in that relationship for so long, and oh, whatever you want, dear, all of a sudden she's in demand, she is desired, and now she steps into her own femininity. And it's a beautiful thing to watch if it doesn't destroy the relationship. And I've seen it work both ways. But it's very cool to see them step into. And I always encourage my clients that if you think of it, try it. That's it. Try it twice to make sure you didn't get a bad night or bad people involved, but try it twice and then make a decision. And just instead of being so emotionally involved in the outcome, being good or bad, just take it in stride that, hey, this is one of those experiences I get to enjoy. Let's see where it goes. And not be emotionally invested in it. Just enjoy the ride. So
I think, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, in every possible way. But I guess it's that being able to do that. And I think it's interesting when you see whatever kind of lifestyle a woman's within, whether she's in a swinging lifestyle or she's in a really vanilla kind of lifestyle, both are obviously as valid as each other. But when you see a woman kind of step into her own kind of sexual power and sensual power for herself, it is a truly amazing, beautiful thing, isn't it? You know, it's not just her sexuality that she becomes comfortable with. It's every part of her. It kind of, I know when I talk about libido and life force and sex drive, actually, it's the stuff that makes us want to succeed. It's the stuff that makes us want to look after ourselves, to give ourselves good nutrition and all that kind of stuff. It's not just about sex. But often, I know somebody said to me yesterday, how do you deal with somebody who is with who likes a lot of sex, as in just a friend, and they talk about it? And my answer was, well, if it makes you really uncomfortable, then tell them that. You don't have to listen to that, but also be happy for your friend that they're really comfortable and they're having a great time. It's not, she was kind of saying, do you think it's because she was repressed beforehand? And I was like, could be, but possibly not as well. Just being free and open doesn't mean that something bad happened in the background. And I think that's another kind of bias, isn't it? That women are more comfortable in their own sexuality, who are more freer, who may engaged with multiple partners, for example, then that must mean that something bad happened to them in the background, which is why they're behaving in this particular way, which for them is, a perfectly normal and acceptable way and should be within society. It's about choice, right?
It is funny. Isn't that funny how natural health, now I'm going to call it healthy, but natural, healthy, unashamed sexual expression of what you really want is considered to be acting out. It's almost as if repression is the correct way to be. And I disagree with that. I think some people are just more private and more sexually, and other people are more sexually inspired and like talking about it. Obviously, the three of us are happy to have a public conversation at any time.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? So what other biases do you think that women face in terms of being sexual when it comes to women and sex? What biases are still kind of lurking in modern society?
I think there's a view that some people have that if a woman is unabashedly sexual and she really, really likes it, that she's somehow tainted in some way. She's less pious, she's less good. There's something a little bit wrong with her. And I think that often women will choose to be perceived as being good and worthy of something, who knows what, but and worthy of something over choosing to be authentic, because they're afraid of that judgment.
And I think that's the thing, isn't it? Is that women still do have far more judgments made against them, against us, for simply kind of being sexual, in a way that pleases us as well, in a way that works for us. And similarly, for sometimes not doing things or not wanting things that are deemed to be the kind of social norm as well. So if we like things a different way, or we don't want some of the things that we're told that we should like, for example, then again, we get that same kind of judgment and shame, which is, well, that's a shame itself, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
Traci, what do you, when you're kind of working with your clients, because I know you work a lot with the swinger community, what do you think is, they obviously have an amazing skill set to kind of step into their sexual power. What for them is usually the catalyst? I mean, it might be many things, but what's the thing that you see when they make that shift and they become really comfortable as sexual sensual beings? What's that kind of moment that occurs?
Well, there's two kinds of women that I've run across. There's women who are like, I could never do that. And then there's the other woman that's like, wow. So those are the two that I see. The women that, oh, I can never do that, typically have some kind of body shame issue going on. They're not comfortable in their body. And so it's working with them to feel comfortable in their body. The woman who's like, well, or yeah, I'm in, is pretty much a lot more comfortable with her body. And she realizes it's just bodies. And there's also the view of what sex is. Some people view it as procreation. Some people reveal it's the sanctity of two souls of a man and a woman. And other women just like, yeah, it's fucking. So it's the view going into it. And then the view of themselves. And then I also wanted to backtrack to the last conversation. Look at the words that we use. For a guy who gets sex for free, he's a stud, but a woman's a slut. And for a guy who sells sex, he's a gigolo, where a woman's a whore. So
that idea that a woman
there,
that is, she's giving something away, or something is taken from her when she has sex, like that I have to say, that one drives me nuts, that somehow you decrease in value if a man touches you sexually, whether it's your choice or not. I think that's something that's got to go completely. And another bias too, I would say, is that sex is for the man, because most of the women that I know that have difficulty with their sexual agency and also with their libido, it's because they're not actually seeing sex as something that's for them. And sex doesn't have to be a full-blown sexual intercourse session with everything under the sun. It could be lying naked and getting a back rub and a little bit of oral sex, cunnilingus, and having an orgasm and falling asleep. That can be sex. And when it's viewed and approached as something that you're doing for yourself because you want to connect, because you want to feel good, you want to feel close, you want to, it's been a long week, you haven't seen much of each other, and you just have been feeling this distance. Well, you don't have to service him now. You're coming together to do something that you both want. It's not about servicing anybody. It's servicing the couple, I guess, I would call it.
No, I think that's very true. And I certainly a lot of the women that I work with, what they actually come for is because they're telling me that they want to be more in touch with their sexuality, because they're not, that's actually impacting on their partner's ego, on their partner's self-esteem. So they come to me because they fear that they're somehow damaging their partner, rather than kind of wanting to step into their own power and into that kind of that really, I mean, it's such a powerful energy, isn't it? Female sexuality. It's such a vibrant thing. It really does make the world go around. It's such an amazing thing. And I think that's when you see women kind of switch from that I'm there to please as rather into a place of I'm there to experience mutual pleasure. That's a huge shift. And that's when you see a rise in libido and People be more curious and their eroticism. You know, that's the other thing, isn't it? I know another bias that I came across, I hear a lot, is when I ask women about their sexual fantasies, is that they're very ashamed about them, and that women shouldn't. It's impure thoughts. I mean, that kind of sums up how that is. When actually, it's essential to our eroticism. It's a key and fundamental part.
Just adding on to that, like one last little bit of it is when there's no way really for a busy woman who has kids and who has a life, um, to really have that much desire when it's viewed as yet another task to complete. It's just another task. And then you feel this exhaustion. It's like, oh, no, I'll do anything to avoid it. Maybe I'll just get busy and start pretending I have laundry that's so crucial that I'm going to be doing it all night long instead of, relaxing and getting naked. Coming to that sexual fantasy thing, I think a lot of women too, who are consider themselves to be fairly independent and feminist, can have difficulty with the subject matter of what's erotic to them, because what is really erotic, particularly when you get into more trusting relationships, when you have real trust for somebody, is not politically correct. And it can feel very shameful to desire things where you're like, I cannot believe I actually want this, or that this feels good. And that part of you like conflicts with this other part, this identity that you have. Oh, I'm a strong, independent woman who would never tolerate bullshit. And yet, you want to be, pushed down and your hair pulled and spanked and bitten and all called different kinds of names. And it's really hot. And it's like, well, who am I? Does this mean that there's something wrong with me? Does this mean I'm messed up? No, it just means that you're having a good time sexually. That's all it means. If you like it, then it's fine. If you're doing it to acquiesce somebody and it feels bad to you, then it's not fine.
Absolutely. And of course, all three of us, we all work with hypnosis. We all work with the wonderful, the most powerful sexual organ that anybody could have, which is, of course, our mind, isn't it? And I think that's the thing. If we help people embrace that part of themselves, that kind of fantasy part of themselves, and also that we use their mind to help them rather than hinder them. It's like you were saying, Traci, body issues, body shame is a huge block to sexual pleasure. And again, that's kind of the modern bias is that, women should be, very slender and toned and, but that changes, these kind of societal values about what sexy looks like, or what good looks like, or what a woman should look like. We've only got to look through history. We've got Renaissance paintings of very voluptuous women, and that was seen as desirable. In the 1960s, we had Twiggy, who was super thin, and that was seen as desirable. I grew up in the 1980s where, our biggest fear was that your bum would look big in something. And now, I was out and about the other day and everybody's wearing pants to make their asses look bigger. It was kind of like all these, I think there was something called Peachy I saw somebody wearing that was literally lifting up her bum cheeks. So it's weird how, we kind of judge ourselves on this kind of moving a moving goal, if you like, when actually there should be no goal other than just to be comfortable and accepting and enjoying our own bodies so that we can then share it with somebody else. But we're told that's another kind of bias, isn't it, about female sexuality, that there are certain things that are sexy, and if it's not like that, then we're not. Simply, or we shouldn't be, or we shouldn't really enjoy sex.
Well, there's a misconception that sexy is some physical characteristic. You can appreciate a physical characteristic, but I think sexy, like generic sexy, is the ability to get turned on.
Absolutely.
Arousal is sexy. Appreciation is sexy. Desire, if you can tap into your desire for somebody else and they feel it, that's the hottest thing that you can possibly do, is have desire for them, which is, we don't even think about it as what? Our desire? Don't you mean we should be the one who's desirable? Sure, yeah. But what about your desire? That's just as important as you being desirable to somebody else.
Traci, what do you think? I mean, desire is it's a huge part of sexual confidence as well, allowing ourselves to experience desire. What do you think about in terms of when we're helping people kind of become embodied in their desire, that they're kind of, what's kind of key to that, do you feel, when we're trying to help people see that they can have these desires and it's okay, you know, they don't have to feel bad about them?
Confidence is the biggest one. And I learned that in the weirdest way. Probably 10 or 12 years ago, I went to a resort in Mexico called Desire. It's a couples nudist with strong swinger overtones resort. I went there with my now ex-husband, and they had a pole dancing contest. And I was like, okay, let's see what this is about, because this was, you know, I grew up learning that pole dancers were evil and strippers were horrible and they're nothing but broken single moms and all other kinds of stuff, which is partially true, partially not true. And so I'm watching the pole dance contest, and it came down to two women. And the one of them, I'm just going to write her off as a Barbie, because she was just perfectly manicured. Her hair was perfect. Her outfit was perfect. She was probably a size 2, maybe. And just a sexy woman to look at her. And the other girl was about a size 14 or 16 farm girl out of Texas. And so they each got 2 minutes on the pole, and the little petite one went first. And it was sexy, you know, not great. That farm girl from Texas got up there and shook that pole for everything it was worth. And she won it hands down. And it was all because of her confidence and fuck you attitude that won the whole thing. And so that right there was the killer. With the confidence, guys like that. And that was it. That confidence was the number one deal. It doesn't matter what you have. It doesn't matter what your parts are. I think our natural wiring is that men are very accepting of women. So long as they're getting a little piece, they're okay. And it works the other way too, where women are a bit more forgiving about guys' looks. So it all kind of balances out in some way.
Something that I would ask, because I get to ask this question a lot, is with women, a lot of women think that being confident means that they have to attain a particular appearance. So once they achieve a certain thing, then they can be confident. So what would you tell women who ask you, how can I be confident? How can I be confident when I look like this? How can I be confident when I'm old, or, you know, I can't have multiple orgasms, or whatever it is?
The key is loving every part of your body and forgiving it for looking the way it does, and thanking it for what it has done for you. So I actually addressed this. I have a group that I work with, and the one girl was all bent out of shape over her stretch marks. And I said, why do you have those stretch marks? And she goes, well, because I was pregnant. I go, and what happened with your pregnancy? Well, my daughter's 4 and she's beautiful. I go, you have to tie those stretch marks to birth and the joy that you now have from your daughter, and not worry about that the skin doesn't match, that some of it's lighter in tone, some of it's darker in tone, that your belly's all out of shape. I said, you can have that fixed, okay? Surgeon will come in there and take care of that. However, if you don't love the stretch marks, and if you don't love your belly right now, the plastic surgery is not going to help you, because when you look in the mirror, you will always see those stretch marks and that belly, and then you'll start to focus on the scar from the plastic surgery. And that's how a lot of women get trapped in the plastic surgery loop. And I see this all the time, living in a nudist resort full time. I see people that are very comfortable with their surgeries, their enhancements, and I see people that aren't real comfortable with their surgeries and enhancements. And typically, another lesson I had, I was playing Scrabble with a group, and the one lady had temporary tattoos of a snail and a turtle where her nipples were. I wasn't in tune to what was going on. I was attuned to the tattoos, going, why on earth did she get 2 tattoos temporary tattoos that don't match. Why a snail and why a turtle? And about 30 minutes into it, I went, oh shit, she had a double mastectomy. And that was her way of coping with it until she could get around to have the surgery. She was having a little fun with the temporary tattoos. And when I saw how comfortable she was to be at a clothing optional resort with the double mastectomy scars, going through this process, I was like, I will never bitch about my body again. I will never, ever, ever bitch about my body again, because that was confidence. That was self-love. That was fuck all y'all. This is what I'm doing to make myself happy. That to me is the key.
I would wholeheartedly agree with that. And it is that kind of acceptance, isn't it? You know, it's not when X, Y, and Z has happened, then I'll be confident. It's about how do I feel confident within all these things that I've got and how I am, because it tells, our body tells our life story, you know, the highs and the lows, some of the greatest things, you know, our bodies mark. And that actually is, you know, if you can look at yourself and see these things and remember, you know, for good or bad, what it was, you know, whether it tells you that you survived something or that you produced a child or you had an accident or even a, you know, a tattoo you might regret, you know, at least you can remember, you know, it reminds you not to be young and stupid again, you know, whatever it might be. So, you know, there's all kinds of stuff, isn't there? And, you know, and again, but that's the other thing, isn't it? Is that, you know, kind of one of the biases sometimes even is that, you know, a woman who is sexually confident is promiscuous or slutty or is somehow, it's a bad thing to be sexually confident is a bad thing, when actually it kind of underpins a lot of other confidence, doesn't it? You know, in terms of being able to step out and show up and stand in, you know, in front of a room and give a presentation. If you're feeling comfortable in your body, at that point, it's not about sex, but it's about being comfortable within the body you inhabit.
Mm-hmm.
I think confidence too reflects what your value system is, because which is a different way of looking at it, because people think, oh, if you're confident, it means that you think you're all that, or you know, you think you're the greatest or you're better than somebody else. And look at you, like, what do you have to be confident about? Like, you know, you're overweight, you have stretch marks, you're getting older, all these different things. And I'm saying it's a reflection of your value system, not somebody else's, because somebody else doesn't have to think you're all that. But if you do, what they think doesn't matter, because now you're feeling good. And as long as you feel good, who really cares? Who really doesn't matter. And so if my value system is, what can my body enjoy? I don't look like I did when I was 20. I never will look like that again. Like, my body cannot go back and do those things that it used to do or look the way it used to look. But I can feel things now that I never would have dreamed humans were capable of feeling sexually. And I wouldn't trade that. And I know things now that I love knowing. I know how to engage in ways that I never could have engaged before. And so I have so much confidence because I appreciate what I can do. And I think that's a different kind of confidence than, wow, look at me, I'm in the perfect condition. My body looks so fucking great. And it better not change. Otherwise, I'm going to feel bad about myself and I should feel like a piece of shit if I gain 10 pounds on vacation. That's not confidence. That's towing the line. And that is the opposite of confidence, in my opinion.
Yep.
So we can all be confident at any age.
So in terms of, you know, how society moves forward, how we kind of empower women to break down some of these kind of biases, if you both had kind of like a message, if you wanted to kind of share with the world of, you know, if like something you want to tell women, you know, that to say, you know, okay, you can let go of these biases and it's okay to be sexual and confident within that and to ask and say for what you need, what would your kind of message be, if you like?
I would say that you'll never get what you want if you choose to be a victim of your sexual circumstances. And the word victim, I know, is a loaded term, but I believe that a lot of women in their passivity are choosing to be victims, sexual victims of certain belief systems. And you can have agency and get what you want, or you can be a victim and you can complain about what's being handed to you. And I think that if you're choosing to be a victim, then you can't really complain, because it is a choice right now. At this point in history, it's a choice, and we have the resources out there that are very easily accessible. And I'm not saying it's easy to do, to shift from one side of the spectrum to the other, but it is doable, and it's certainly worth doing.
How about you, Traci?
I would frame it a little bit differently. You miss 100% of the shots you never take. Okay, you only go around this lifetime one time. It's your job, it's your life mission to enjoy this ride. So make the most of it and do it responsibly. Don't do it at the expense of other people. Do it with full consent, but just have a great time. That's it. Sexy comes in all different kinds of flavors. Okay. Just because you're not everybody's kind of flavor doesn't mean you're not sexy. Somebody out there finds you hot. I guarantee it. I see it all the time on the cruise ships. When I did the swinger cruises, I was amazed. Okay. I've been probably in a 70-pound radius on the swinger cruise lifestyle. I've been really heavy and I've been really thin. I got laid more heavy than I ever did thin, because when I was thin, I was actually unapproachable. People were like, oh, they were afraid because they didn't feel they looked as good as I did at that time. And so they wouldn't approach me. But when I put on like another 10 or 20 pounds, perfect. So don't judge others' perception of what sexy is.
No, absolutely.
Just claim you're sexy.
Absolutely. I think for me, I would tell people to let go of the shame, just let it go, and to please yourself first and then worry about pleasing others. And if you're pleasing yourself first, then you're in a good place to then, to share pleasure with someone else, until you know kind of what makes yourself tick and you have confidence with that and confidence communicating it, then that's really where you need to start, because otherwise it's really impossible. So that 3 good strategies for people to kind of embrace themselves, isn't it, and move forwards.
I want to add one. Can I add a strategy?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, I tell my clients a lot of the times that sex is like a game. Okay, you don't win if you play baseball. Do you win all the games you play? No, sex is no different. But you still like to play sex. You still like to play baseball. There's a chance that you're not going to win, but you play anyway. Sex should be the same way. Just enjoy the game. That's it.
That's cool. I like that. And sometimes I guess sometimes you might lose, sometimes you might draw, sometimes you might win. And sometimes it's the absolute cliffhanger of a game that, has you on the edge of your seat the entire time. I like that analogy. That's kind of cool. I like that a lot. Trancing in the sheets. It's time for things to change.